We are moving on with our journey into the 39 Melachot of Shabbat. These are the 39 categories of forbidden activities that by avoiding doing these, we are making Shabbat holy and proclaiming Hashem is the creator of the world. Leather was required for one of the coverings on the Mishkan. There are 7 Melachot that are related to making leather. The first step was trapping the animal. The second step is slaughtering, or Shocheit. The slaughtering is not limited to only the types of animals that were used to making leather. It's the act of killing or drawing blood that is prohibited on Shabbat. So direct killing of any creature is prohibited on Shabbat. Even causing a mortal wound in the creature that causes it to die after Shabbat would be prohibited. Shochet, or slaughtering, is the direct killing of any creature that this is prohibited on Shabbat, whether this is through an act of slaughter or any other way. And it doesn't matter the size of the animal or the type of the animal. It includes insects, it includes large animals. So how would this apply to our typical Shabbat? On Shabbat, it would be prohibited to deliberately step on a roach, an insect, or a spider, or smash it with your hands, flush it down the toilet, or even wash it down the drain. It would be prohibited to spray insecticide on a swarm of ants or other insects that have invaded your home on Shabbat. You could ask a rabbi if it's permitted to spray insecticide around the ants in order to prevent them from spreading, or you could ask a non-Jew to do the spraying. Flies or mosquitoes, you may shoo those away from you, but intentionally killing them on Shabbat is not permitted, since they're really just annoying. Any dangerous or poisonous animal or insect may be killed or trapped on Shabbat if it is in the vicinity and poses a threat. So examples of these would be hornets and poisonous snakes, scorpions, a rabid or vicious dog, a brown recluse or black widow spider. These all can cause great harm and even death. So there is an exception in the case of lice. Lice and nits may be killed on Shabbat. Any dangerous or poisonous animal or insect may be killed or trapped on Shabbat if it's in the vicinity and poses a threat. Hornets, a poisonous snake, scorpions, a rabid dog or raccoon or squirrel, a brown recluse or a black widow spider. So these are all a danger, and they could be either killed or trapped on Shabbat. It's always best, though, if you can ask someone who's not Jewish to take care of those things for you. There is one exception that was related in the Talmud, and that is in the case of lice. It is permitted to kill lice, so if your child or you have lice or nits, it is permitted for them to be killed on Shabbat. Now, Shochet also involves causing any bleeding even when the injury is very mild, and the creature will live. So deliberately pricking a finger or removing a scab on a person when bleeding is going to result is prohibited on Shabbat. Causing bruising, since really that is bleeding even though it's under the skin, is prohibited on Shabbat, and really that's undesirable every day. But it's best to avoid activities that will cause bleeding. So if you have sensitive gums, you would want to avoid brushing your teeth or flossing your teeth in a normal manner on Shabbat, or using a toothpick if these are going to cause your gums to bleed. Pulling a loose tooth would be prohibited on Shabbat since it's likely to cause bleeding. You cut yourself, it's common to squeeze the wound to try and get out more blood. That would be prohibited to do on Shabbat. Of course, any attempts to stop bleeding is permitted on Shabbat. So, having a blood test would normally be prohibited on Shabbat, since this does require the drawing of blood. However, if the blood test is required on Shabbat to prevent a threat to one's life, such as with a diabetic, it would be permitted to perform the test for yourself. Of course, preferable to ask someone who's not Jewish to do that for you. You'll want to have a discussion with your rabbi on your particular circumstances. The next step after the animal is killed would be skinning the animal in order to obtain the hide. So skinning, or Mafshit, is the third step and category of the prohibited Melachot of Shabbat in the leather making process. So this applies to the skinning of any animal with a hide that's usable for a purpose. So mammals, crocodiles, birds, and even fish. The skinning of any of these animals would be prohibited on Shabbat, as would removing the skin from raw chicken or turkey or fish. So on Shabbat, it would be prohibited to pull the skin off of a raw chicken in order to feed it to your dog or your other animal. There is no prohibition, however, of pulling the skin from cooked fowl or fish on Shabbat. Once the animal is cooked, the skin no longer adheres to the meat, so you're not really doing the same process of skinning. Also, once cooked, the fowl and the fish become food, and there is no prohibition of removing the skin from food. However, removing the skin could fall in the category of borer, separating, and this should be done by hand just before the meal. That concludes the brief journey into Shochet and Mafshit, so continuing your learning into these. There are many opportunities here for asking questions of your rabbi about your special circumstances that you may run into on Shabbat. So continue on your journey of enhancing your Shabbat and continue with learning with Torch.